Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to the June 2019 UK and Ireland Partner Monthly Cloud Update. So today, as promised, we will be looking at a CloudGuard Logic demo. I'll come to that shortly. But the agenda for today's call is the usual pretty much. So what's new this month? What have we been doing? New SK articles, updates, new versions, all that good stuff. We'll spend a few minutes recapping the CPX events that we had in the last month in Ireland and Scotland, and also looking ahead to London and beyond. The partner training update, so similar to what we had last month, just some more information about the additional date in Ireland that we have, and some plans looking further towards the second half of the year. And then the main rump of today's session, which is the CloudGuard Logic demo, giving you a view on the new module in Dome 9, what it is, what it does, what it's for, what its use cases are, etc., etc. And then any time left over at the end will be time for Q&A. We have a Q&A panel open. If you've got any questions, please feel free to post them in there, and we'll see if we can deal with them while we're actually on the call itself. So what's new this month? A couple of things really around Azure and AWS is updating the marketplace images to include newer jumbo hotfixes. So in Azure, we've updated the R8020 gateway image to take 17, so we're bringing that more up to date. We've also added support for availability zones in the UK South region. That's going to apply to both the IaaS VMSS template, but also the HA cluster template. So if you have customers that want to take advantage of availability zones in Azure, then certainly have a look at those templates. UK West still to come, because I don't believe UK West has availability zones at the moment. So as soon as that's ready, obviously that template will be updated to reflect that. As I mentioned, AWS Jumbo Hotfix 203 added to the gateway AMIs for the R8010 release. So that's been updated there as well. Now, one thing that we commonly get asked about is, how do I upgrade the management in the cloud? How do I safely update the gateways in the scale set? How do I migrate from transit VPC to transit gateway, etc.? And there's a lot of these questions that crop up fairly frequently. So what we're doing is we've got an initiative underway to really build out the documentation that we've got around these particular questions. I remember 3 or 4 months ago, we had a session looking at the central deployment tool, which we use to patch gateways in a scale set. That still stands. I mean, that still works. I still owe you all a video on Checkmates to show you how to do that, and I do intend to do that as soon as I get the time to do it. But what you'll get within these guides is sort of the TAC approved way of performing these processes. So if you've got like an R8010 management server in the cloud, what's the best way to get from R8010 to R8020 in a supported manner. So a few of these documents exist already. So, you feel free to have a look at those. But like I say, it's going to be a rolling process where we start adding these bits of documentation, either as SKs or actually into the main admin guides themselves for you to consume, and sort of give you some good ideas of best practices and things like that. From a Dome 9 perspective, there's stuff going into that literally on a daily basis. We already mentioned about CloudGuard Logic, so that's the artist formerly known as Magellan. That has been released on June the 11th, which is good news for us. The support in the initial release is only for AWS around CloudTrail and VPC flow logs, but work is well underway in adding Azure support to that as well. So the expectation is sort of second half of this year, you'll see that as well. In terms of GSL and rule sets and that sort of thing, because we're always under pressure to add more cloud objects, to that particular module, give customers more flexibility and more granularity with the rule sets that they run. We've added 3 new Azure objects so far this month, so Container Registry, Cosmos DB, account, and Azure Network Watcher. I must admit I've not had a chance to play with them yet, but you'll see them as a preview item within that console, but to all intents and purposes they're fully functional and they should be perfectly fine. Another question that we've started to get from the field is around the CIS benchmark 1.2.0. We have now just published a managed rule set for that in AWS, Azure to follow. So for customers that are asking for that, we can provide some support on that now, with more to come behind that. And on top of that, the actual managed rule sets that we provide out of the box with Dome 9, 34 new GSL rules have been added across various different rule sets, across various different cloud provider platforms. So again, they're kind of constantly being refined and added to and improved as we go along. So a quick recap on the CPX events. We mentioned this last month that we had these events coming up, and I've got to say I was really, really blown away by how successful the Dublin and Scotland events were. And I know we have some of those sponsoring partners on the call, so certainly from me, thank you very much for your support, for sponsoring the events, for allowing us to make them happen. I think they went really, really well. We had guest speakers at both events from Microsoft and AWS. We also had some of our global evangelists involved, Eddie Doyle and Oded Vanunu. I know those 2 particular sessions were very popular. So yeah, like I say, far beyond my personal expectations, and I think there's real sort of momentum to keep that going into next year. CPX London is still to be confirmed. I think we're looking at kind of October time, early October time for that. But obviously, watch this space. I don't know if that's official yet, so hence me not putting it on this particular slide, even though this is being recorded, but never mind. And CPX 360, that of course is going ahead again next year. The same pretty much time frame as we had it this year. So if you're going over to the APAC one or the US one, good on you. I won't be going to it. The US one's moving to New Orleans, I believe, from Vegas where it was previously. But the European event will be held at the same venue, the Messe Vienna in Austria, sort of the first week of February or so. So Feb 4th to the 6th, 2020. So if you need a bit of elbow grease to get permission to go, now's the time to start really. And obviously partner early birds and all that sort of stuff will be announced in due course. But just to kind of get that date in your diary and let you know that that's happening. A very quick partner training update. So again, we mentioned this last month. This is pretty much the same slide as last month, with the exception of a bit more detail around the Ireland date. All 3 dates we currently have are fully booked, which is great. So again, thanks a lot for your support. I will be looking to put some on later in the year. If you would like to host one in your particular region, let me know, because it's not always the best thing to sort of drag people down to London because it's expensive, and some of you guys have got to travel a bit of a distance. So if you're willing to host that, and we can say in Scotland or whatever, or somewhere further north, then that would certainly help us out. It means we can bring in other partners in there as well. But yeah, if you're registered for that event and if for any reason you can't make it, please use Eventbrite to manage your registration. We do have people on the wait list. So if you know you can't make it, please obviously cancel your registration and let someone else have that place, because we don't have a lot of them. We're going to be looking at some additional dates, probably late October, I would have thought. It all depends on venue availability and things like that. We are also trying to get the CCVSE into online training, but that's going to take a little while, because the focus at the moment is to get the Dome 9 CBT set up. So that's the priority for the training guys at the minute in the partner enablement team. So then CloudGuard Logic. hopefully this is what you're here for. This was sort of the this is what I promised last month. Just to give you a quick recap on Logic, if you weren't on last month's call, as I mentioned, this is the module that used to be called Magellan. So you may well have seen this at CPX, or you may have seen me showing it off to you or something like that. What it does is there's a lot of data that comes out of the cloud when you configure logs, and there's a real issue with kind of signal to noise ratio, if you like. So the way to pitch this to customers is, excuse me, you've got VPC flow logs analyzing all the network traffic. You've got CloudTrail logs that are looking at everything that happens kind of from an API call standpoint. But it's really difficult to proactively keep on top of the logs that you're collecting around these particular events and things like that. But not only that, it's not the most kind of user-friendly operational model to have to use. VPC flow logs generally just kind of text files with lines of text that without context don't really mean a whole lot. CloudTrail logs you can look at in the console, you can put them out into an S3 bucket. You could use things like Amazon Athena to run queries on them over the top of S3. Some customers, have said, well, we already do that. Why would we kind of need Logic? But the whole point of Logic is that it's essentially cleaning those log files, giving you a much better view of it, a better way of querying those log files, but also because we've got continuous compliance wrapped around this in the same way that we do with compliance and governance, we can really go and look for suspicious events every hour and then go and raise a ticket, send an alert out, whatever. Which if you were doing that the manual way, if you were doing that through log files using Athena, it wouldn't really be that easy to do. It would be quite onerous to manage, and it would be a little bit bitty. So that's really the whole point of Logic, is to try and bring a bit of sanity, bring a bit of visualization to what you're seeing in these logs, and have the ability to kind of almost do the Tony Stark thing where he kind of pushes his hands out and from the display that's hanging in midair sort of thing, you're pushing the stuff into the background you don't care about, and the things you do care about that you want to investigate, you're bringing that to the foreground, and it's cutting away a lot of that noise, and it's bringing the important stuff up to the top for you to deep dive into, drill down, and find out actually what's going on in that cloud environment. So GSL has been extended to include queries around VPC flow logs and CloudTrail. You're going to see that shortly. It's priced per gigabyte of logs per month. So obviously, because we're consuming these log files, a consumption-based model is the one that makes the most sense. So that's the license model that we use. I mentioned about Azure support. That's following on shortly in the second half of this year. So obviously, as soon as that's ready, or we can do any kind of preview, I'll let you see that. From a licensing standpoint, it's still going to require a Core Dome 9 license, so you're still going to need the minimum of inventory, clarity, and compliance, and all of those sorts of modules, kind of the first three from the left, if you like, on the menu bar. You're still going to need that if you want to have a license for Logic on top, so it's not like a standalone product or anything like that. Another use case or another benefit of Logic is that you can bring in these unstructured log files, pretty much the VPC flows and the CloudTrail log files. Bring them into Logic, essentially cleanse them, format them, and then you can fire them onto standard NOC seam tools, NOC and SOC seam tools around Splunk, QRadar, Logarithm, ArcSight, all those sorts of tools. And that, in the longer term, is going to be the way that we would recommend customers archive the events that we find in these logs, because the amount of storage we need to consume to run Logic on the back end is pretty massive. We're not going to retain it for a very long period of time. So the best way for customers to sort of keep a historical view of everything that's happening in that cloud environment ultimately is to put it into that seam tool, which, to be honest, these days I think most people have. So with that in mind, it's time to pray to the demo gods and hope everything goes all right. So this is the standard console that you're used to. Nothing particularly unusual about this. So if I go into the Logic Explorer, this gives us the view of what's going on in Logic. So this is the start point. So you can look at flow logs in CloudTrail for particular IP addresses or an asset name, or whatever kind of fuzzy search you want to do. We have a number of pre-built rule sets that we have across the top here. So threat hunting, you see this sort of thing. So there's very, very similar to what you see in compliance and governance, just a slightly different view, I guess. You can also write your own custom queries. You'll see a few in here that people have been playing with. Account activity, a lot of the fairly standard ones. So let's just drill out from that. So things like, if someone's created an S3 bucket, if someone's deleted a Kubernetes cluster, someone's deleted a flow log. I mean, some of these are sort of alarm bell ringing type things where it might be someone trying to cover the tracks or something like that. And sometimes it can be a genuine mistake, but even so, it's the sort of event that we would want to know about, because we can't watch everything all of the time because the cloud landscape is just too vast. So, a few other typical sort of examples: login without multi-factor, login from malicious IP address, all these sorts of things. So there's a really good bunch of queries out of the box that you can use to get you up and running quite quickly. You see that when we draw the relationships between these objects, it's drawn in the swim lane view that you're used to with Clarity. So you should be pretty familiar with how this looks. And by the way, Clarity is being re-engineered to look like this in Clarity version 3. So that's coming soon, in inverted commas. But the whole point really of Logic is, as well as having these standard queries that we give you and custom queries that you write, I mentioned this sort of Tony Stark effect, if you like, this pushing away to the background some of the stuff that you don't care about. So if we delve into network activity as an example, and this provides us with the whole view that we're seeing. So these are all the relationships between, there's an external there's a malicious IP address, that's actually Amazon's network itself. So there's traffic going backwards and forwards, and lots of things going on, lots of complex relationships, lots of lines, and it's a bit of a spider's web. And I think it's probably, it wouldn't be surprising the first time you sit in front of a customer and you show them this, that they think that's quite an intimidating view. There's a lot going on, and kind of, how can I work out what's going from A to B and all this sort of thing. So the way to do that is, like any problem, break it down into small pieces and start looking at it that way. So for example, Lambda traffic, because Lambda and serverless functions in general are extremely short-lived entities, in the blink of an eye, they could fire some traffic in or out and then just kind of disappear again. So you can't really monitor that in the same way as you can with, say, an EC2 instance or an Azure virtual machine or whatever. We've got to try and treat it in a different way. So for example, in this way, we want to look at Lambda traffic, either where Lambda is the source or Lambda is the destination. So we can pick that query and then pick a time frame and an account and start. And hopefully I've picked a good example. We can actually see some data. No, I picked a bad example. I do apologize. Been that kind of week really for things going wrong, so I'm not really surprised. So let's try this one again. So as I mentioned, you've got these various different pre-canned queries that you can pull out. And I've mentioned this previously. I know we're on a few of the demos and things like that around the fact that we're not just thinking about virtual machines anymore, but we're thinking about RDS, we're thinking about Lambda, and immediately you can see the relationships between this Lambda function and a lot of external things. So for example, there's a web server here, there's a RDS there. I'm not quite sure what that is. So if we click on it, we can have a look at it. But you can see the relationship between this and that. You can see the way the traffic flows. And you can kind of see here, this stuff's still here, but it's in the background because actually at the moment, we're not primarily focused on that. We're looking at this. But very quickly, we can zoom away from that and zoom into something else and have a look at it. Another good example, actually, probably a better query, is if I look at malicious accepted traffic. This is a really useful sort of out-of-the-box query, because the way we identify malicious IPs within CloudGuard is that we use Threat Cloud, which I think most of you probably know. So we get a whole bunch of IP addresses that are sending bad stuff around the internet. This is going really well today, isn't it? And this comes into Dome 9, and from here we can then start drawing out some specifics about what's going on within these log files, and how we can look at the relationship between the malicious traffic and the inside cloud objects. Why is this stuff not showing? There's a lot to be said, actually, for recording demos before you do them, I must say. Right, let's try that one again. But if I go to my malicious one here, for example, so if I use that as my starting point, and then you see we're pushing all the stuff away. This is malicious, a malicious IP address. I can look at what this is. It's a scanner. I can look at the log file to see actually, how do we get to this point? How do we draw this relationship between this malicious IP address and these cloud internal objects? So let's see if we can pull something out of the log. But just to jump back to this again, we can look at the direction of traffic flow, zoom in on this, and you can see actually there's a jumping off point here from this load balancer to these other web server boxes. So these are in play as well. So hopefully you get an idea of the ability to very quickly filter out the signal from the noise, see what's going on, see the relationships between these different things, and then you can start closing those gaps. Well, this is just a pain in the bum, isn't it? So just to quickly jump away from that while I'm having a bit of a mare with it. So these are the rule sets that we've got within Logic. These are the pre-built ones. So if we drill inside of these look very similar to what you see in compliance and governance, except they're more obviously tailored towards events that we capture either within the network layer or within API calls. So you see here things like changing S3 encryption, doing things in code commit, deleting repositories, all sorts of things that, generally speaking, you probably wouldn't want people to do, or you want to use elevated permissions to do that. But what you can do is the continuous compliance is done in the same way as it is for compliance and governance. So come in here, you can't actually run these, by the way, at the moment. You notice that the rule sets, you don't have the little play button on them in the same way that you do with compliance and governance. So the way to run these at the moment is to run these through continuous compliance. So every hour they're going to go in there, they're going to look at the log files that we've consumed, they're going to look for specific identity and access management issues. So you can see events that are going on here. Logging in from my malicious IP addresses was one we looked at earlier. And when it finds that particular issue, it's going to do a notification based on whatever you configure in here. So if I look at this, for example, this is much the same thing. So this is exactly the same thing that you do for compliance and governance, but you're just doing it for Logic instead. So I see a particular thing going on, and then I act on it depending on how I configure this notification profile. So nothing new to learn really on that front. It's exactly the same pretty much as we do as we do within compliance and governance. Good. We got some log files to look at. So in this particular snapshot of the log file, you see the GSL is looking at the VPC flow log where the source is malicious, yes, or the destination malicious is true. So this is all malicious traffic coming in and out that we see in the VPC flow logs. So you see here, there's nothing unusual, nothing different about the way we represent these logs. Pretty straightforward stuff. But then as you open the lines out, you then get this enrichment of the log files, which is the thing that Logic provides over and above what the native cloud platforms do. So you see here, We've got to reject, start times and the VPC that's involved, the source and destination information, which, to actually pull that out using Amazon Athena or whatever would be, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's going to be very, very difficult. In much the same way that we do with some of the other tools that we have, we've got the ability to link into IP info. So if you're seeing malicious traffic coming from particular parts of the world, you can, again, the key use case for this is having geo-restriction abilities, locking them out either through a WAF, or you could do it through CloudGuard IaaS. You could do it both ways if you really wanted to. You could do it through security groups, kind of the world's your oyster. But if you are seeing a lot of malicious traffic from a certain geolocation, it would be possible to block that off. So I don't think there's anything much I just want to show you at this point, but hopefully this gives you a sense of the sorts of things that Logic can do. Obviously, I'm having a bad week where demos are concerned, so we'll leave that on one side. But the whole point is we're moving away from this thing about protecting assets at the network level, but we're also looking at it from a kind of IAM level and looking at the sorts of actions that could typically be construed as malicious or dangerous to an organization if there's misconfiguration involved. So this will get improved as time goes on, and like I say, support for Azure is upcoming soon, most likely around the networking logs to start with, and then obviously the identity side of it as well. So just to complete for this month, the CloudGuard IaaS Marketplace images have been updated, as we mentioned. There's a lot of new features within Dome 9 this month. CloudGuard Logic is available now. If you want to look at some sort of partner portal sort of thing, let me know and we'll see what we can organize. Might be a bit tricky because of the volume of data, but we'll see what we can organize. The partner training, as I mentioned, is full. If you can't make it, please cancel your registration so we can get people in off the wait list. I will try and schedule something later on in the year, sort of late October time. Please remember that there isn't a monthly webinar next month. I'm actually having a holiday, woohoo! But we will be back at the end of August with more fun and games and a lot more to tell, no doubt. So with that, thank you very much for your time and your attention today. Great to have you all on the call. Have a great July, as I won't speak to any of you, and we'll reconvene again on the last Friday of August at noon for more CloudGuard goodies. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.